Hello and welcome. You are listening to the Fertility in Focus podcast. I'm your host, Christina Burns, doctor of Eastern medicine and holistic fertility expert. In these weekly sessions, I'll be bringing you the best of advice on nutrition, lifestyle, and natural medicine to optimize your fertility. Let's jump into today's episode. Hey everyone, welcome back. So today we're going to talk about nutrition and fertility, and specifically what I refer to as subclinical or silent anemia. And I see it a ton, honestly, and it's a major factor in unexplained infertility, and that's basically just like low iron status. I find that this isn't really checked frequently. Like maybe hemoglobin is checked, which can assess I would say pretty advanced anemia, but I think we should be looking at other markers for it that show you in advance of it being bad, and if it's potentially affecting your fertility. At least from my research, it does. And in Eastern medicine, a lot of the fertility herbs are iron rich. And so it leads me to believe that, fertility is well treated by having, a richer supply of iron in your blood. Makes sense because of all of its cellular activities, which I will get into right now. So in general, an iron deficient state can cause a number of adverse health consequences, affecting all aspects of physical and emotional well-being in women. Iron is an essential element involved in a variety of vital functions, including oxygen transport, deoxyribonucleic acid synthesis, metabolic energy, and cellular respiration. And one of the things that inspired me to do this podcast is that I see also pregnant women in my practice, and so many of them are anemic. And I always tell them, we better, start doing something about this now, And then later on in the pregnancy, they find out they're anemic. But it wasn't checked earlier. Nobody confirmed it. They weren't checking other markers for it. And it's not helpful for the baby. It's not helpful for you. It'll make you miserable because it makes you so tired. But if, over 60% of women become anemic during their pregnancy, that would lead me to believe that a lot more are, subclinically anemic even before they are pregnant. And it makes sense because we bleed every month, right? I mean, maybe you don't bleed as regularly if you have amenorrhea or PCOS. Maybe when you do bleed, you have heavy periods. And, even if you have PCOS and don't bleed as frequently, maybe you have an inflamed state in your body that's leading you to not absorb nutrition as well. So we're going to get into that, and we're going to get into the research of what was found about lower markers for iron, such as ferritin, and how that correlated with fertility issues. And so let's first explain how to test for it, so you know what to ask for. So there's the hemoglobin, not to be confused with the hemoglobin A1C, which is a marker for insulin resistance, but hemoglobin is a marker for anemia. Serum ferritin is arguably more useful as it can indicate low iron stores before anemia develops. Ferritin correlates with iron storage. Another indicator is serum transferrin to assess systemic iron issues. I most frequently ask to see the ferritin. Let's talk about the research. So in one study, women with unexplained infertility demonstrated a lower transferrin saturation and hemoglobin concentration. Women with unexplained infertility had lower ferritin levels more often than controls. So the women with unexplained infertility had lower ferritin levels than the women who didn't have unexplained infertility. In a multivariate model, unexplained infertility and abnormal thyroid antibodies were associated with ferritin. That I found very interesting. The conclusion was that ferritin levels under 30 were associated with unexplained infertility. And I have seen that thyroid issues, especially autoimmune thyroid issues, but thyroid issues in general, are associated with ferritin issues, and thyroid and low ferritin are associated with infertility. And a lot of the time, unexplained infertility, which is a very annoying diagnosis because you're led to believe that there's nothing wrong except that you're not getting pregnant. a large prospective study of over an 8-year period, which included over 18,000 premenopausal females who regularly take iron supplements, demonstrated a significantly lower chance of infertility than females without consumption of iron supplements. Now, I have very mixed feelings about iron supplements, but this was very interesting. An 8-year study, over 18,000 women, and those who supplemented with iron had less fertility issues than the ones who did not. Additionally, in a recently published study on 84 females who suffered from recurrent pregnancy loss, compared to 153 healthy controls, females with recurrent pregnancy loss demonstrated lower serum ferritin levels in the control group and had a more frequent occurrence of low iron status, which was defined as their ferritin levels. And I had a patient yesterday who has been having recurrent pregnancy loss, and more questioning, like, okay, so your iron levels are off, okay, and your ferritin and your iron indicator, and then your thyroid's also off, like, and you're doing IVF, and I'm like, even if you get a good embryo, who knows if it will stick, because the basic things are off. I see a lot of people doing IVF and it's not working, and even if they have tested embryos, implantation's not happening. But if you don't have the resources to feed this little one, it's not going to happen. Or if it does happen, you and the baby might not be getting what you need. So it's like, we want to go quickly to a solution, just get us pregnant so we feel like that part is over. But we also want to do it in a way that's going to be healthy for both of you. Okay, so now we've seen, the research supports that a low iron status measured by ferritin levels especially can be an issue for fertility. But what if you feel that you're eating an iron-rich diet, but your values are off, right? So that could be autoimmune. We mentioned the thyroid autoimmunity. The role of serum autoantibodies to fertility is still under debate. So this is domain of reproductive immunology. But there are studies about association with iron deficiency. So autoantibodies associated with iron deficiency, and then if you correlate iron deficiency with infertility. So that's what I look at sometimes. Like, a lot of the time people are like, oh, well, there's not research for this, that, and the other thing. I'm like, but if you look at it like this leads to this, and just use common sense, then yeah, there is, right? Sometimes you just don't get, A plus B equals C, but you can be like, A leads to B, leads to C, leads to infertility. Recommend that you put it into a big picture model so that you can understand the interactions. That's the whole idea of like holistic medicine, and a holistic way of looking at the body is everything is interacting. You can break it down into parts, your gastrointestinal system, your cardiovascular system, your muscles, your bones. You can break them down into all the parts, but guess what? They're still all talking to each other all the time. And if you neglect that fact, then you don't really find solutions very easily. So one of the autoimmune things that can interfere with iron status is autoimmune gastritis. So, inflammation of your digestive system. A lot of it is like reflux, but it could also be intestinal. Celiac disease is a very common one. A lot of people aren't diagnosed with celiac disease, but you might have a gluten sensitivity. It's honestly why I recommend a gluten-free diet to so many people. Thyroid autoimmunity is a big one, as there's a correlation between thyroid issues and subclinical anemia. So what's the solution? So it's not just to go eat a bunch of meat. I do recommend a diet rich in iron, as iron supplementation can be dicey. I have a couple faves. You are welcome to email us at info@naturnalife.com, and we can send you a link to our favorite iron supplements that don't tend to constipate and tend to be really well absorbed. They're more naturally sourced ones. So that's info, INFO, @naturnalife, NATURNALIFE.com. It can be found on our website too. And then we can help you out that way. It's always better to get a prescription, but we can at least guide you to the ones that we find safe and effective for a large group of people. So I mentioned that eating beef and meat all the time is not great. I do recommend some animal food in the diet because animal foods are rich in iron, B12, very bioavailable, naturally sourced. Do not eat conventional meat. Eat from the farm as much as you can. And I always recommend game meat over beef, like venison, bison, ostrich, that kind of thing. Those are high in iron, low in acid, less inflammatory, less hard to digest. Other, plant sources of iron, beet powder, I like that. They use that in the islands for anemia. Beets in general, but beet powder is obviously more concentrated. Pumpkin seeds, pumpkin seed butter, dark colored things in general are higher in iron, like dark leafy vegetables. They also will have your bees in there, lentils, black beans. You're getting this theme of like the dark colored things, right? So those are helpful. Now, if your digestion sucks, that's an issue, right? Like that's something that should be targeted. Like that's one of the arguments for an anti-inflammatory diet is to just heal your digestion a bit so you get your nutrition absorbing better. It's also, you got to think about the relationship to food. Like, are you eating fast? Are you scarfing it down? Then that's not going to be great nutrition. Are you really stressed out? Because that attacks your digestive system. Are you eating late at night? Are you eating big portions? Are you not chewing your food? Are you eating a lot of raw food that's hard to digest? So these are the type of things that you need to be thinking about. In general, I say eat very cooked food for easy digestion. I do find that it's just more gentle, more easy to absorb. And people will say, well, what about, overcooking the food will, make it so that the nutritional status is lower. I mean, I actually don't think that that's the case with certain things. I actually think sometimes stews and soups are more nutritious. But, if you're worried about those vitamins, you can also supplement with like a tiny bit of juicing, right? I did a recent podcast on the juice protocol for implantation, which, by the way, involved beet juice, which is high in iron. But we don't recommend in Eastern medicine to consume a lot of raw cold juices because it's not beneficial for fertility. But in small amounts, it can be very healthy for the vitamin nutrient content. So one thing to keep in mind is that I've noticed that there are certain medications that really cause iron deficiency, specifically GERD medications. Gastro issues lead to taking things like Nexium or other reflux medications, and those cause severe malnutrition. And it doesn't even have to be very long taking it, and they can cause this issue. So if you've been on those medications, that can be an issue for your nutritional status. And in general, I would just make sure that you check everything and pay attention to your digestive health. And, you check all the side effects of pharmaceuticals that you take because, they can deplete you of a variety of things. Like a lot of the very popular weight loss medications deplete you of a lot of nutrients. Birth control depletes you of a lot of nutrients. And so, sometimes we just have to spend some time getting the nutritional status up to snuff for you to get pregnant. Not for nothing, if you have secondary infertility, like if you're struggling after having a baby, you might have just lost a lot of blood and never replenished it. I see this happen a lot, C-section or complicated birth or what have you, or just like a very kind of active postpartum period, like you never really rested, and that can lead to fertility issues down the line. One of the most common reasons for low iron status is heavy periods. So heavy periods are part of it. Maybe you have adenomyosis, maybe you have fibroids, maybe you have polyps, maybe you have PCOS, maybe you have endometriosis, or maybe there's no diagnosed condition and you just have heavy periods. But as I mentioned before, there are other reasons why you could have low iron status. Could be your nutrition, could be your digestive health, could be autoimmune. And so we have to kind of look at all of those factors. I'm really happy you've tuned in and joined the community, and I'm so excited to bring you more helpful content with each episode. In order to make this podcast as helpful as possible, I want to hear your input on what questions you need answered to get you feeling empowered on your fertility journey. You can DM me on Instagram at @Naturna_life or @naturallycb to share your most important fertility related questions. And if you're enjoying this podcast, please follow and share with friends. My mission is to help as many women and couples as possible. And for that, I need your help. Yours, as always, in love and light, Dr. Christina.